Technology.
Oh my gosh.
All right, we are live. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jay Schenirer. I'm a city councilman from District 5. Thank you for joining us today. I am here with Ryan McClinton, who is a community organizer here in the neighborhood. Works a lot in Sacramento with area congregations together. Let me, as I've done this before, let me do a very brief update on City Council on what we did last night, and then I'm going to start asking Ryan some questions. Last night was kind of a historic moment for the City Council. We had a joint meeting between the City Council and the City Youth Commission. So we had all of our youth commissioners sitting side by side on Zoom with the City Council and really heard their recommendations about what we should be doing for young people right now. And this was in relation to how we spend the part of the CARES money, the $89 million in federal money. They had four buckets that they thought were most important. One was mental health, one was summer activities, one was jobs, and one was education. Much of the education work was really around the school district, and so we'll be talking to see how we can do that. But the other things were very much front and center for the discussions that they've had and the discussion that we then had at the council last night. So what we did is we put forward a proposal. I put forward a proposal that really met three of those needs. So the first on mental health, which we know we know everyone is suffering these days, but we know young people in particular, particularly high school seniors who haven't been able to walk across the stage and haven't had graduation ceremonies. And then so many young people who have just been confined to their houses for so long. So what we did is we had a proposal to create a peer-to-peer mental health support system where we will work with one high school in each of the council districts, plus one or two continuation schools, train 10 to 15 young people in mental health support at each of those schools. So we're providing 100 to 150 jobs for young people who will then work in these schools around issues on mental health. We know from surveys, one, that young people, 65% of young people surveyed said they did not know who to call if they had a problem. And as importantly, 67% of them said, we want to make sure that we call a friend if we have a problem and can do that. So that's what we're doing on that. That will start up in the fall. We also added $500,000 to a jobs program that we put together. So that will create jobs in the fall and the winter, 250 jobs for young people in each of those quarters. And then finally, we put up to $2 million back into our pop-ups. Those have been very successful in giving safe places for young people to be. We're not quite sure yet how far the $2 million will go because so many have switched to virtual and we don't know what the cost factor is in that or when they'll be able to go live and in person. So we did those three things. We're looking at a number of other issues. The Youth Commission will come back in a short period of time with more recommendations, and hopefully we can put some more dollars into our young people. So that was the council actions last night. I'm really proud of the council being very much pro-youth. That was an important point in time. And this was really the first time ever that we have done a joint meeting, I think with any of our commissions, but having the Youth Commission first, I think sends an important message. So with that, I wanted to turn to Ryan. Ryan, thank you so much for being with us today. Let me just start off by saying I think it's so important that when we talk to folks, we know their stories. Because if we don't know their stories and what drives them, it's hard to, I think, collaborate and work together over time. So maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get to the position that you're in now?
Oh, well, thank you, Jay. And first, and I do want to start off by sending kudos to you leading the charge and continuing to lead the charge in making sure that we prioritize our youth in the city of Sacramento in a powerful meeting with the Youth Commission, bringing forth some changes that they definitely need and some support that hopefully will continue to carry forward. But yeah, to the history and how did I get to being as well of a community organizer? I am a born and raised South Sacramento native of 34 years, having an opportunity to live just about in every district in the city at one point or another through my 34 years. And one of the biggest things that I had looked at over my years working in different sectors and industries was that, oh, can you hear me okay? Is there, Jay, you still there? Okay, I see that we're still live, so I'm gonna keep rolling. But yeah, one of the things I had noticed over my years being in different areas of the city is that we have a rich talent pool in Sacramento of homegrown talent, folks who move in and make Sacramento home. But often we allow that talent to move to other cities and other communities without understanding of what's here and what's just nurtured in the soil that can give so much back to the community. So as a lot of my friends and colleagues and folks that I grew up with started moving out of the city to pursue other opportunities, I took a stance to stay local and kind of going that way. I think we've lost Jay altogether now. And I hope this is not just me on the live broadcast. Until we get Jay back, I'll definitely echo the need, though, and the power of having folks locally from Sacramento understanding the impact that we can have in our community. I know the Youth Commission is comprised of community members from the various districts in Sacramento City, and their input has been huge to continue pushing us forward. I want to see what's going on here because, let's see. Okay. Yeah, I think Jay had some connection issues there. But yeah, just continuing to lift up the local voices here in Sacramento and understanding that so many of the, oh, there we go, Jay.
All right. Sorry, I lost you there for a minute. I think that was me. My apologies.
No,
go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, I just kind of continued to share just being a native of Sacramento and recognizing that there's so much talent and so many things, so many people from this area that have so much to offer that often move to other cities and pursue other opportunities outside of Sacramento, that we can really change the dynamic of what Sacramento's potential is if we really focus pouring that back into the soil. So I made a conscious decision some years back to remain local and start doing what I can to not only do my part in lending some of the skills and the talents I've acquired over the years, but also calling on helping pour into the folks who are from our city do so, but also calling for those coming in to recognize that you have so much to offer to the region. But let's make sure that we're taking care of our soil first before we look at other spaces too, which I think has been huge.
Great. No, that's wonderful. Thank you. So maybe I'm assuming you've been pretty busy the last 2 weeks. I know you've been in a lot of this. Kind of maybe tell us what is an ACT community organizer been doing during these couple of weeks of unrest and protest and really people finding their voice.
Yes, well, I think one of the key things that we've done as a faith community and as a community organizer is we really looked inward to really listen deeply to those who are closest and in pain in this moment, from our faith leaders, from our staff organizers, to our leaders, and really understanding where are folks at and what's our pain points now, but also what are some of the things that really will bring forward the change that we need in this moment. So it's also been listening to community partners, stakeholders, some institutional partners, and really trying to connect the dots and really build bridges across some of these sectors where we might not always communicate as frequently as we need to, but as we're learning that our collaboration really goes deeper, we're having a greater impact of really seeing what can we do to kind of bring some change forward. So it's been a whole lot of Zoom meetings. I think today this is my 4th video call of the day so far, averaging about 10 to 12 a day. And that's just on the virtual platform. That's not counting the actual phone calls and the social distance meetings that are starting to take shape as we've slowly been reopening, but I'm still trying to keep those to a minimum. But yeah, it's definitely been a lot of communication, be it meeting spaces with as many as 40 to 50 people on a call to as small as just 1 or 2. But every single one of those conversations being connected to what's going on in our current environment.
So, and are you hearing things that you did not expect to hear, or like what are you hearing? Let's start with that.
I think I'm not necessarily going to say things I didn't expect to hear. I think it's just the level that they're being vocalized, I think, has definitely been amplified. And some of the boldness, I think, in some of the statements that have been needing to be said or have been treaded around over the years are really being taken in the stance of we can't have any more. Enough is enough. And what I mean by that, it's layers around what are the ways that historical oppression, institutionalized racism, and some of those things have played in the outcomes we're seeing right now that people are completely fed up with, be it from the law enforcement lens, be it from access to resources in the healthcare spaces, mental health spaces, our school systems and educational structures, just really across the board. And folks saying that I need our leadership in whatever institution or whatever structure they operate in to take a public stance against institutionalized racism, and not just saying the statement, but then what are we actually doing to identify those disparities and take actions towards correcting those things? We have to acknowledge what's really there first before we can work on whatever the solution is. We often talk about, and just like in the medical field, it's really hard to treat a wound if you don't understand the depth of that wound. And I think that's what I've probably been hearing the most, is just how deep those wounds go and how many things are connected to them. So the pandemic was already having a massive impact on our communities of color, right? The recent police killings of so many Black lives have brought up a whole other layer of that vitriol and whatnot. And it's a point where now folks are like, I can't talk around it. I'm going to say it directly. And I need you to say it directly, and not just say it directly. I need you to move directly into that.
Yeah. I think for me, Ryan, the analogy you just made on the depth of the wound is really appropriate. I think for me, hopefully as an ally, really understanding how deep that goes and being able to see that has been, I don't want to say eye-opening, but has been probably, or has impacted me greatly over the last couple of weeks of watching that. I've always, and I have friends who talk to me about who are frustrated, who are maybe angry, but the depth of that really has been, I want to say it's been a surprise, but has been an awareness awakening piece for me as well.
If I could ask you a question, Jay, has it shifted conversations in different spaces? Like, do they come up more frequently, or how does some of that kind of unfold for you on some of the things that in the space where you're recognizing them?
Yeah, I think it has. And it's forced me to, it's really forced me to look at myself and ask some questions of myself, because I think it always begins with you, right? If you're going to do anything. I think that, and you've known me for a long time. I've been fighting for young people for 20 years, whether it was on the school board or the city, and tried to be that voice. But I think a level away from the day-to-day, really kind of at the policy level, and trying to be thoughtful and all of that. Understanding what that day-to-day is for others, I think has shifted that population, and lots of conversations with my wife. We don't always see eye to eye on this. A little bit more radical than I am.
Yes, being as a strong one.
Yeah, definitely. And also my kids, to be honest. I have two in Seattle who are pretty much out there. I don't think they've been part of the protests, which I'm happy about. In Seattle, that's just a scary place right now. And two in Austin that are probably a little bit more in line with where I am. But it's forced us. And then what we're doing as a family is we're going to start doing some readings together that we should do. I think it's called White Fragility. White Fragility is the first book that we'll read as a family. So I think it's forced me, and even like some of the statements that I've put out, and we put out something which was fairly extensive a couple of days ago with our monthly newsletter. I probably rewrote that many, many times, and it changed every time I wrote it, actually calling for more as I've talked to people and really understood that. But yeah.
I definitely.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I definitely appreciate you sharing that. And it is something that I think it's a space that a lot of folks find themselves in. And I was just curious, like, how are folks approaching those conversations now, right? Like, is it something that that it is more of a true, deeper internal look? Like you said, we always have to start first. And then even where are we doing it as a family unit, right? And all the different layers, like you said, a day removed from our day to day, there's so many other ways that it shows up. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that and giving some insight to how that process has been unfolding.
Yeah, well, I hope we're doing the right things, and you got to think, you have to hope that there's a silver lining to all this, right? We're going through this horrendous time. People actually have found their voice So there are a few things to me that are exciting if we can even make that juxtaposition. I mean, the fact that the diversity of the protesters is something that we haven't really seen when doing something that are primarily, I don't want to call them African-American issues, but that are issues that have been primarily looked at by the African-American community. This is very different than when Stephon Clark was killed and who is doing the protesting and what's happening with that. So I think that's an exciting point. And I think we have an opportunity right now that we haven't had in a long time because of this. And I hope we don't waste it. That would be a shame on us if we do.
Absolutely. And I think one thing to add on to what you're saying there is amongst the energy being carried forward by so many different, the diversity that's out there in the streets. And there was diversity with Stephon Clark. And I think it's a wider base and more consistent base of that response. And when I said that, I lost the train of thought I had for that. But I was
picked up on it because the other thing to me is that the number of young people have been involved. And we see these 14, 15, 16-year-olds who are leading, and just so articulate. The protests that we had here in Sacramento last Saturday, we had 15,000 people. Alan Warren's son, Braxton, I thought was probably the most articulate speaker that we had during that whole event. And it was just amazing. And so I think those young people stepping forward, the youth commissioners that we had last night, talking about how they feel, that's where the change will come from eventually. We need to be allies and supporters there, but I hope they lead.
Oh, yes. Thank you. You brought it back to where I was wanting to go with that. That power of those voices that are often unheard or not supported in leadership, right? Our young folks have been prepared. And I feel like it's more so they're, like you said, they're finding their voices. I know in our household, we had a senior grad who took his stance on the last day of graduation to let the leadership at his school know that there's been some very problematic things as it relates to race that need to be addressed. And it was both a powerful and a challenging moment in that he found his voice and he said, I'm going to say something. And to even hear him afterwards say such a relief came off being able to get that out. And it's like, it took you to your senior year to feel like you could do so. So, I definitely hearing that part of like, Alan's son being able to speak up, being about 15 years old, and really how do we continue to support our young folks to understand that you aren't just the leaders of tomorrow, you're the leaders of today. And we need you here now, to help lead a lot of this conversation. So again, the support that we offer them, the ways that we help develop them are even more crucial to that point.
Yeah, I think one of the youth commissioners last night said, you always say kids are our future. This is the present, and we're here now. So I totally agree with you.
Yes.
So let me shift gears just a little bit. But as a community organizer, what's next? Where do you go now? I mean, the protests continue. They're not as large as they have been. I assume that they will not die out, but there will be kind of something constant. But where do you go? Where does ACT go in the next month, and then over the next year, really?
Yeah, I think it's now is a time of moving what we've been hearing into action. Understanding that we're talking about a lot of bold ideas that at one point, they sound radical and crazy, but the more we realize where we're at, it's like, no, this is just the next step we need to be at. And we probably did a disservice to ourselves taking so long to get here. When we're talking about the movements of defunding the police, a lot of people say, oh, well, you're trying to take safety away from our communities. No, it's actually the opposite. We're trying to reimagine what safety is. And I know we've had some dialogue leading into the current crisis we're in around how do we reimagine public safety and some of the things that we can take care of on a community preventative lens versus an emergency response lens, and really leaning into those spaces. And again, what are the allocations budget wise, and what are the staff shifts that have to happen, and what are, again, those deeper internal, as we talked about, as we mentioned a few moments ago, looking internally first. What are those institutional elements that we have to really restructure and start really addressing to remove a lot of the bricks that have posed barriers in moving some of these things forward, right? There's opportunity when we talk about, some of the CARES Act funding and some of the responsive things we do there. It's, are we caring for property and businesses or people first, right? We've seen a massive amount of unemployment that hit our region, as well as we were able to temporarily stay some of the adding to the homelessness numbers. But once this pandemic is lifted, folks are going to have to find a way to come up with 3 months of rent that they probably didn't have before that, let alone in a pandemic where you lost employment. So like, what are the things we're prioritizing and how that goes forward, and how are we making sure that families receive support on there? And then continuing to understand that we had such a huge microscope shown on all of our systemic flaws for our communities, right? Our Black communities, our Latino communities, our communities of color, across the spectrum. And we have a huge opportunity in really reimagining what's that look like, and how do we really dive into those things boldly, unapologetically, and take zero tolerance stance on some of the things that have created the dynamics of where you've seen the pain that came up with folks, right? There's a lot of thoughts around the policing apparatus and what that looks like. I think a big portion that hasn't been addressed, and we're really calling for now, is how do we say that Sacramento, a city of diversity, one of the cities that has been touted as one of the most diverse cities in America, takes a zero tolerance stand on institutional racism within its own ranks, and making sure that we're removing any staff, not just officers. If there's administrative staff that have issues with that they're removed, because that's not what our city should be represented of, right? That's not safety when we have somebody who has internalized hatred towards another being for just who they are, right? Whether that shows up explicitly or implicitly. There's a lot of nuance there that we can get into, but I think the first step is really just saying that we as a city of diversity won't stand for institutionalized racism. Our community deserves better for that collectively. Our brothers and sisters who come into Sacramento, this is a great city that people come to visit and never want to leave, right? And I think that for us to continue to live into that culture and the evolution of Sacramento to the great city that it's always had the potential to be, we have to take the bold stance on making sure that we're uprooting those systemic issues and really diving into the investments of what does public safety, public health look like in a broader lens than what we've currently housed it in.
So what's the best way to have those conversations, and how do others participate?
Well, number of ways. As always, definitely reaching out to our council members, and so thankful for the platform that you opened up to hear direct feedback from a lot of our community members. But also, continuing to show up to the various spaces where these conversations are taking place, right? School board meetings are one that it impacts all of our children, and there's a lot of things that are decided there that a lot of family members find out on the back end and say, well, why didn't I hear about this? We got to show up in the spaces. I think it's also communicating with your fellow neighbors, brothers and sisters alike, right? There's so much of a shared reality that we often have on the other side of our fence, literally our house fences, right? Or the other side of our wall, depending on where we're living, or just 20 feet away from us, that we don't have that open dialogue and that in-depth dialogue of what's your experience, how is your family member experiencing this, and moving that forward. I think are key steps. I know that the city is constantly rolling out programs, as you lifted up some key ones there, making sure that we're having ways to understand what's coming. How can we connect to those from a community standpoint, from a faith-based standpoint, and really making sure that it's getting into the hands that need it most, and that they're prioritized, where often they're minimized and have the lowest feeling of the impacts of some of the changes that we're having until further down the road, right?
So I got two more questions. We have about 6 minutes, and we can go a little longer if we need to. But the first one of the things that I think the council is going to need to wrestle with is this very real tension between investing CARES money to provide relief today versus providing relief and investing. So I think a really good example, and $89 million seems like a lot of money, but we've spent it about 5 times over in the number of proposals that we've gotten, and when we continue to get them. So providing rent relief isn't immediate. We can provide money. We could probably spend the whole $89 million on that. Providing relief to small businesses, as an example, who employ folks, is something that's more long-term, which helps individuals immediately, but then also really, I think, invest in the future of Sacramento, because we want to maintain those employees, and those employees can then pay their rent. How do you balance that one? That's a really tough one for us that we're going to have to wrestle with quite a bit.
Right. Well, I think it's it's two parts, right? And as I said, when we open the question of what is the role of organizer been, during this time, it's been deep listening and understanding, where do the priorities actually fall, right? And listening in non-traditional ways. It's easy to say, okay, we'll have a town hall or we'll have this meeting in this section and we'll put it out through our, usual networks, but it doesn't reach everybody there, right? So what are ways that we can actually do some deep listening of like, what are your most immediate needs? And I know that there's been a number of community organizations. We've done a listening campaign with, I think, 300 families that we had tried to support through fundraising. And, again, the efforts led by Sierra Health, partnering with the city to really kind of
they donate for Sacramento. I know we
right
$30,000 into to match what you had already done, which was
absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And the families were definitely thankful for it. And they realized, hey, is there going to be anything else you can do beyond that, right? But taking those opportunities of where we have been able to reach some of that vulnerable population. What are your greatest needs? And then what are the things that would help sustain you a little bit longer, right? So the balancing act, I think, comes in the prioritization as we're listening. I think it's not an either or approach with any of the things you lifted, right? The reality is our small businesses need help. Our residents need help. We have to think about sustainable for the long term. But I think that's that part of like, what's the healthy balance and where can we really meet people where they're at and where the most severe need is at, right? If folks are unhomed and they're thankfully able to get a job, but they now have to come up with double the money to try to find another place that might not be available. It's like, what are you putting before the cart before the carriage or the cart before the horse, or, how does that kind of roll out? So I think it's really finding like, what's that most urgent need that protects our families and then invests in our families and then continues to build on the next bricks of opportunity. And that's, from the lenses, as I've been doing a lot of listening, I think it truly does come from collective listening from community stakeholders. And I'm talking about people who are just residents of Sacramento, as well as community-based organizations that are connecting with these families and seeing what they're seeing and learning how their support has rolled out during this time. And then also the small business community. They have a lot of feedback of what that's looked like for their families and what those dynamics look like too. So deep listening would probably be the first step to help identify where to prioritize.
Okay. So I think this is the last question. So let's trade lives for a second. You're the council person.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God.
What do you do tomorrow?
What do I do tomorrow? I come out and I communicate with as many colleagues as I can within city departments that I'm able to communicate with and take a public stance to actively end systemic racism and identify it within our structures, and then reach out to the community stakeholders that can help best inform that process of what are the things that we may have not recognized have happened. Not saying that it's been done intentionally. A lot of this is carryover from decades and decades and decades past that we're still trying to work through now. So how do we actually take that collaborative approach to uprooting a lot of those systemic issues that will help solve a lot of the issues that we're trying to address now? That's me. But
that's great. So let me know when you're going to run and I will walk precincts for you.
Absolutely. I think we got a colleague by the name of Dr. Flojan Kofer that we might want to talk to first.
Different districts.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes, that's a great voice to be reckoned with. Anyway, Ryan, I just want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know you've got a lot going on. And hopefully folks will see this. And if they have questions, they can call my office or email our office. I'm on the city website and we can pass those along to you as well. And honestly, I look forward to continuing to work with you. We have so much work to do in this community. It's a great community. People step up. We've seen that over and over again. I think where they step is something that we can help guide in a lot of ways. And we just need to make it a great Sacramento. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate the time, and thank you for your leadership in this time. It's huge. Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Right. Take it easy.
I just have to figure out how to turn this off and we'll go. Have a good day.